And that ranges everything from a 4K camera and a 6S iPhone all the way through to the Mac Pro with dual monitors and 4K and all of that good stuff. So I have three eminent professionals with me this afternoon. I'm going to go down the line and do a quick introduction, and then I'm going to ask them to talk a little bit about themselves. So to my left, we have Devin Tantrum, a documentary called The Russian Woodpecker. And I hope I get this right. I think it won the 2015 Jury Prize for Best World Documentary.
Yeah, World Cinema.
At World Cinema at Sundance. Yeah. So has a lot of experience in that form. He's going to talk a little bit about documentary workflows and using Apple stuff. In the middle we have Clayon Condit. Clayton's got a big long resume, so I won't go through the whole thing here. We'll be here for half an hour. One of his biggest claims to fame is he's the co-founder of a post-production house in Minneapolis called Splice. Does a range of commercial work and broadcast TV work. One of his most recent projects was an indie film called Voice from the Stone, starring Emilia Clarke from Game of Thrones. As you can tell, I'm not a super big fan of Game of Thrones, but lots of people are. And I can never pronounce her character's name, so I'm not even going to try. It's Daenerys Targaryen. Daenerys Targaryen. Okay. So Clayton could talk a lot about his use, and also I think what they got up to making that indie film. And right down the end is Mike Fernandez. So Mike works for NBC Universal, does a range of different broadcast projects. One notable example is George the Rescue, NBC cable channel program, and he can talk in some depth about what goes on in the broadcast world and also how they use Final Cut Pro 10 and Apple to do that. So with that, I think we'll just go down the line. Maybe you guys could do like a quick 1 minute intro. I think the question I'd have for you is maybe give us a sense of how you got involved in video making or filmmaking. What was it that got you started? And then we'll talk a little bit about workflows. So maybe I'll start with you.
Hi. So I grew up in Southern California, and I had a theater background, but I started working with film and video in high school. I had, played around with it before that, but it was really a means of avoiding writing essays, and so creating projects with friends on video was a lot more fun than sitting alone and working. And from that, with my theater background, I took a film program at the New York Film Academy before my senior year of high school, and it was basically to determine whether or not I wanted to apply for theater or film programs in college, and I fell in love with film. We were shooting 16, cutting on flatbeds, and just the whole thing swept me up. And I went to film school at Syracuse University, and I was still involved in theater there, and I came to New York primarily to start an improv troupe, and kind of concurrently with that, I started working in documentary film. One of my first gigs coming out of college was a film called A Dream in Doubt, where I started as a logger, and I wound up the final editor, and that premiered on PBS Independent Lens and went on to have like a whole education package created around it, and I've been working in documentary and video ever since then on both coasts, both in documentary and in I've worked for a bunch of startups kind of creating their video department, and then most recently moved back to New York in 2012, and it's been just purely docs since then, long and short form.
Very cool. Clayton, how about you? How did you get involved in this caper?
I'm essentially just a uber techno geek who has done radio and music, and I've done some theater as well, and on stage, behind the scenes, just sort of touched a little bit of everything. And so I actually grew up in Iowa and moved to the big city of Minneapolis, and so I've done a much more diverse background as an editor, and then actually ended up building a facility, surrounding myself with really great people to do some really great work. So, and we've just, you don't get pigeonholed in a market like Minneapolis. You have to do a little bit of everything. So I've done music videos and documentary, and now I'm doing feature film. And as a facility, we do a lot of broadcast work for major networks. And so it's sort of a mix of whatever sort of interesting and in front of you at the time. So that's the short of it.
Very cool. And Mike?
The Indiana Jones stunt show spectacular at MGM Studios in Disney World. That was the moment. That was it. I went and saw that. I was about 6 years old, and I realized that Indiana Jones is not a real person, and that it's a movie that is made with a bunch of people. I was like, if this is a job, like I want that. And that was it. I've never changed my mind since. Made films in high school. Went to the School of Visual Arts over on 23rd Street, and from there just ended up getting gig after gig. It was just music videos, commercials, political campaigns. I got into news for a while, and ended up working at a .com when flash videos were really cool. We made a bunch of short videos, and we ended up getting turned into a production facility for NBC, and they bought us, and I've been working at NBC for about almost 10 years.
So I might go back to Clayton in the middle. I guess one of the last big projects you worked on that I referenced was the Voice from the Stone movie. Can you talk a little bit to us about the process of making an independent film? What was involved? What are some of the challenges? How that project worked, and for the audience here that are thinking about that kind of part of the industry, how do you get involved in that kind of thing and move a career forward in independent filmmaking?
Sure. Well, it's like anything. It's relationships. I mean, we as a facility, we supported a local filmmaker. Made a couple of shorts, one of which was a short list for an Oscar, and got some attention. Got some, LA rep, and is making feature films now, and I'm his editor. So I mean, that's it's a matter of sort of supporting and believing in the people around you and being a part of their success. So that's part of it. Making an independent film or any film is a miracle, quite frankly. Whether you get money or a cast or both, it's this particular film is a Dean Zanuck film. It's third generation Hollywood, and he can't even make a film very easily. It's been 10 years in the works, and we finally. The magic aligned, and we got money, and we got Emilia, and the film is made. So from a post standpoint, as an editor, it's just it's not much different than making a big budget studio film. It's just we have to wear more hats. I have one assist instead of 2 or 3 assists, and you just take on all the roles, and you get it done.
So talk a little bit about the workflow. So you edited this film in Final Cut Pro 10. Talk about having multiple roles. What were some of the things that stood out to you as being cool about that? What are some of the advantages you saw about using that technology? And how did you apply it in the film, and what sort of benefits did it bring?
I'll say I've been editing a long time. Final Cut 10 was a nice refresh for me. I mean, it gave me some sort of new energy just because it's a fresh way to look at it. Now, I've cut Avid, I've cut Final Cut 7, done a little bit of Premiere, and just the way it was organized was fresh, and just gave me allowed me to be a storyteller rather than a technician, and just sort of, we have a facility that's very organized, built around Xan, built around, just organized workflow, and I can, quite frankly, I actually cut most of the film at my home studio and was able to work with my assist who's, half an hour away, and just, it's just all very dynamic, and as long as we had systems in line and organized, it was pretty slick, very smooth, so.
And there may be occasions when people have said things like, well, I'm not sure that Final Cut Pro 10 is up to making a major motion picture. I mean, what would be your response to that?
And I'm not being paid to say this. I will.
No, he's not being paid.
I will not. I won't. At this point, I wouldn't make a change. It's pretty magic as an editor just to be able to organize and work timelines, and it was a big mind shift. I cut a short film for the same director just sort of as an exercise to prove it, because we knew the feature was coming, and yeah, I mean it's the real deal, and it was just from the metadata searching, the magnetic timeline, all that stuff. The way I managed audio was huge. Some of the time manipulation and optical flow stuff. It really is a storytelling tool for me to be able to do some stuff that it was great. It was a great experience.
So, I mean, if you had a similar project again, you'd choose the
Oh
same
yeah,
tool.
yeah. We're talking about the next one, and I wouldn't change that at this point.
So, Mike, maybe you talk a little bit about what you do. I know one of your challenges is you're doing episodic television that's always tight deadlines and multiple episodes every week. And
Yes.
you're working in higher resolution footage, certainly beyond HD. You want to talk a little bit about how that works and some of the challenges associated with that?
Well, a lot of the shows we produce are all reality-based programming, and that's hours upon hours of footage. You're looking at roughly 20 plus hours of footage per episode, and you have roughly about a week to get it done. And it's very difficult to have to manage all of that media, and on top of that, we're also dealing with we're transitioning into Ultra HD because 4K is kind of the next big thing that's going to happen in media, and we want to get all of our content 4K ready. So we're already shooting that, even though we don't have a means of distribution right now. So we're dealing with very, very large file sizes, and we're dealing with a lot of footage, and it's very heavy. And when we were kind of exploring options, we started looking at all of the edit platforms, and the Final Cut was really just it could handle everything and well. Having a deadline is intense. Like I said, I only spend usually about a week with the show. There's shows that I've edited that I don't know exactly what they're about. I watch them later and I'm just like, oh wow, that was good. Because it's just you don't have time. I think, like I said, I think the record is 3 days, start to finish, on a show, and you have to get it out and hit air.
How's that even possible? I'm curious. So when you do a show in 3 days...
Lots of Red Bull.
Is there any sleep involved at all?
There is. The beauty of the program really was just being able to do keywording and stuff like that. And if I can do all the organization first, the reason why I love using Final Cut facilities is that I don't have to think about the technical stuff when I'm editing. All I'm doing is I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, I need a shot of this. Okay, this is my story. I know this is what I needed to say. Where are all these things? And being able to just focus on telling a story is paramount. And that's the only reason we were able to do it in 3 days.
So those sorts of issues, Devin, must come into documentary filmmaking as well. I guess we can talk a little bit about the challenges there. You have a lot of footage, none of it's scripted. I mean, how do you go about, pulling all of that together and piecing a story together out of all of that?
Yeah, well, it's similar problems to a similar situation as what Mike was talking about, where we have tons and tons of footage. And one key difference being we also have multiple formats from multiple cameras. In some situations, we're getting footage from stringers or just random people who happen to be at an event, so it might be in different frame rates, which is a whole different issue. But in terms of structuring and creating the actual piece, we luckily have a lot more time, and for me it just becomes play. It becomes about how quickly can I get into actual cutting, and creating scenes and creating moments and just seeing what I have that I can then begin to structure and begin to mess with. And I think in the documentary world, it's so much about keeping your ideas open for as long a period of time as possible, and not getting married to something until you know that it's right and you know what story you have. And a big part of that is sort of a pre-cutting thing of having everything transcribed and doing a paper cut and then applying keywords, which is where X comes in, and it's fantastic for this. Having 200 hours of footage that you have taken keywords from transcriptions and applied them to the clips, and then when you're playing, which is the fun part, I mean, that's why you do it. You want to do this, you just grab it and you make it happen. And the structuring part comes, it just sort of, for me, it just kind of magically happens. There is deliberate strategy involved in it, but so much can change when you find like a magic piece of footage that becomes an entire scene that you shape something around, and it can generate like, oh, this is who this character is, this is what the film is about, and then you have these scenes that are pre-built, and you can just like create 17 different versions of the film, and you can say that's the one, that's the story, and then you direct
So
yourself
you feel
towards
like, having that sort of direct access to the footage, it enables you, do you think, over the course of a project to tell a better story, or to be able to find a better story because you're not worried so much?
Absolutely. Like, instead of having to dig through folders and then like return to books of paper transcriptions, you can have everything at your fingertips and just work much more seamlessly between impulse and like result. That's what it always is for me. Like I want to be able to take an idea that I just have suddenly and do it instead of having to wade through a soup.
So it kind of leads into my next set of questions. I might start with Mike down the end. In terms of the students going to a conference like this, thinking about coming into the industry, I guess from your perspective, working at NBC, what do you think they should be thinking about in terms of the skills that are going to help them progress a career? Given some of the challenges we've talked about, and also the prevalence now of digital technology and so forth, what are the implications for that? I mean, how do you stand out when someone turns up at NBC looking for a job? How do you, beyond having the contacts, how do you present yourself in the best light? What sort of skills are going to make you successful?
It's a big transition in the industry right now. It used to be, when I started out, it was being an editor was okay. Like, you could just be an editor, and that's it. Now you have to be an editor, you have to be a camera guy, you have to be a producer. You have to be able to know how to do a little bit of everything. And if you can spend a little bit of time doing each step of the process, it ultimately makes you more versatile. And also, I think it enhances, every craft enhances the other. If you know about cameras, you know what to shoot for your editor. If you edit, you know how to communicate with your camera people. You know how to talk to your producers. It's being able to do a little bit of everything at this point. The term one-man band is very much thrown around, and we love that. When we see candidates that, I can give them a camera and say, hey, go to set today and do this, and then when they come back and be like, all right, rough cut what you shot because you were there, so you know exactly what the good stuff is. It definitely helps to be as versatile as possible.
Does that also apply in the sort of work that you're doing, Clayton, both on the slice side and also, in the filmmaking world, independent filmmaking world at least?
I mean, you just have to know so much. I mean, the assists and younger editors at our facility know so much more than I do now. I mean, it's hard to keep up because they're our offline guys or online guys when they need to be, and they're cutting mats and fixing stuff and helping the VFX guys when just because we're on tight deadlines and whatnot, and all the tech, so you got to have a nice diversity of skills. But all the tech stuff aside, I think getting to your question and having young folks coming in, you got to have a little bit of humility. Make sure you're listening and learning from the folks that have been there before. I was taught as an assistant editor, the last thing an edit session needs is another opinion. So just knowing when to, learning session skills, watch, because you can be an uber geek behind the scenes, but if you can't manage a client, you're less interesting to me from a hiring standpoint. So you just got to watch and learn sort of the magic of running a session, which has layers of dynamics to it, as well as just knowing the gear and confidently doing what you're asked or what you're not asked, and figuring out on the fly what's needed in the session. So,
And on the post side, in terms of the sort of work that you've seen, and I know you've done this for a while now, how's that changing in terms of the sorts of clients you have and what they're demanding? I mean, do they demand more? You know, you've got all these new distribution channels. Does that have an impact on the work, or is that less the case?
I mean, the model, it's the same, it's different. You're, as a facility, we're just doing higher end, bigger stuff and deliverables. What I do, I can essentially do on a laptop. So for me as a facility owner, it's like, well, how do we differentiate? It's the big rooms we're doing. We have a DI room for color and our mixed rooms. Those are the things that separate a facility. Otherwise, I'm just another freelance editor who could be cutting my jammies at home on my laptop. I mean, so it just depends on the kind of work. I mean, it's we're nicely positioned just because we have a nice client base that demands a facility still, but that's ever changing. So.
What about documentaries? What sort of skills make a good documentarian? That can be very challenging.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's just fascination. That's what I've seen kind of across the board with people who have devoted their lives to documentary is fascination with everything, interest in people, interest in minutia, and I think a skill to have that I do not have is being bilingual. I think if you're interested in documentary, to know another language fluently will certainly set you on a different level. If you're, especially as an editor, I've somehow edited like 3 films that are entirely not in English, and I only speak English, and it's made it a little tricky. And I've done it with success, and that blows my mind.
How did you pull that off? I'm curious now.
Everything is transcribed pretty much before I start working with it. It's transcribed, and this was actually a kind of X workflow. Our transcriber created the subtitles in X on low res string outs of the interviews, sent us XMLs of just the subtitle track, and we just popped it on top, and then I can start cutting. And I came to understand Russian phrasing
Yeah.
without really knowing exactly where a word starts or ends. And luckily, the director of that film spoke Russian fluently, so I could kind of manipulate what I wanted the dialogue or VO to be, and then he would adjust it. But if I spoke Russian fluently, it would have helped, and certainly will would enable me to get more Russian speaking jobs. So I would say learn another language, whether you want to be an editor or a documentary filmmaker, like a director. Like there's no way around like the access you can get if you can speak in someone's mother tongue.
So all of this leads me to my kind of next broad question.
Man, I think if you're getting into this industry now, it's probably the most exciting time for it. There's more ways to get your stuff out there than there ever has been. Before, if you wanted to make a movie, you had to be in the studio systems, and it's the only way anyone was going to see your stuff. Now television is taking cues from movies, and it's much more cinematic, and it's much more broad in scope. And then on top of that, you still have the internet platforms, Hulu and Netflix, and they're competing very heavily with television. There's so many ways to tell your story, and it's really just a matter of what is the story you want to tell and what best serves the platform. I think in terms of technology, I mean, you know, a lot of it is, you know, movie theaters, you know, that's why every movie's in 3D. You know, it gets you to come to the theater to see it in 3D. For TV, we're going to push 4K because that's going to be, we want you to watch TV at home, so we want you to have the best television experience. But you still have, you know, you can, I frequently watch, you know, television on my phone, you know. There's so many different ways you can do this now.
How do you stand out in a world like that where there's so much content and it's, you know, flowing from everywhere?
You know, I've had that conversation before with other editors of just what makes you different, and you know, everybody can write. You know, everybody can sit down with a typewriter, a computer, and write. It doesn't make you, you know, Shakespeare. Same thing with video. It's, you know, just because you can shoot with a camera, it doesn't make you Steven Spielberg. It's the story you tell is going to be the thing that makes you different. And everybody has their own stories, you know. I mean, you can sit and ask you, any of you, you know, what did you do today? And that story's going to be drastically different. And it's just being able to tell a story. And if you can tell that story to the best of your ability and really, you know, in a very true way, it's going to resonate with people. And it doesn't matter that there's 6,000 other people that are doing it. Yours is going to be unique, and that's what is going to make it stand out.
What about you, Clayon? What's your view on this? What do you think you're going to see?
Sort of building on. I mean, don't make a movie just because you can. You know, we always talk about that. Start with story. You know, and consider the audience. You know, we see so many independent things that come across that are sort of self-indulgent exercises, and I just think, you know, we're so diluted and saturated with what's out there right now. It might get worse before it gets better, but I hope that the quality of content does get better. But it's just so easy and inexpensive to make stuff, and so people do. So I just would challenge the next generation to really start with story, consider an audience, work for that audience, earn it, you know, and make it interesting and worth my dollar. Otherwise, you will get lost in the shuffle because there's just way too much sort of stuff out there that's not as worthy.
And I guess the same applies in documentary to some extent.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I'm hoping that the future brings about the death of the word content, because story is what's important, and the art of filmmaking is what's important, and pushing that forward. And I think that that it's important for every generation, but especially a generation that has been raised on quick fix video information, that we all become more demanding of quality and be more selective. And in terms of documentary filmmaking and the future of it, it's already very, very interesting, but I think it's going to get even more interesting as camera technology continues to shrink and shrink and shrink. A lot of the really, really fantastic and pieces of the Russian Woodpecker that set it apart were the fact that we had at times like 3 hidden GoPros in scenes, and we were able to capture all this footage that just would never be seen, would never be allowed to be seen if the subjects knew that they were being filmed, which, you know, might be, you know, morally dubious, but what results is a collapse of the ability of crummy people to hide their crumminess. So I think that's definitely one way it's going, and then, you know, I think that filmmaking goes in 2 directions of being super low budget and available to everyone, so you'll get this amazing diversity of storytelling, and then we're going to see like skyrocketing budgets as CG becomes just completely blended with reality, and as immersive technology sort of takes hold, and I think VR is definitely the next frontier. And I think that, I don't even know if you're going to be able to put it into the same category as traditional filmmaking, because it's going to require an entirely different visual language to pull off. So I think that's definitely...
Have you dabbled in that? Have you done any VR?
I've looked into it. I haven't actually shot it. I've downloaded sort of 360 video to see how you actually cut it, but I don't think that 360 video is truly where VR is going to be.
And you think you'll see that in the next 10 years?
Oh yeah, we'll see it in the next 2 years.
So one other general question, and then happy to answer questions from the group. We talked a little bit specifically about Final Cut Pro 10 and the editing tools. All of you use many different parts of the Apple ecosystem. You know, maybe starting with Mike, what is it about the Apple ecosystem, both the hardware and the software, that makes it so useful? I mean, why do you use the platform? What parts of the platform you use? What are the advantages?
Oh boy. You guys need to make more stuff because I think I've bought everything. I literally, we use every single piece of Apple technology in our everyday. The laptops, the Mac Pro computers, we just got 30 of the new, the black ones, which are great. The iPad, on sets for notes, we use it as teleprompters. You know, it's every device is utilized. I think every producer has 2 iPhones. Yeah,
Why is that?
'cause, you know, you need to have, you know, one for phone calls, one for emails.
One for each eye?
It's kind of ridiculous. Just the amount of stuff that we use that you guys do.
Have you ever done any shooting on an iPhone?
Oh yeah, 100%. I've taken iPhone footage and it has been on the air. You know, we use it for the time lapse mode on that is just better than the GoPro. I mean, and it's thinner too. You can hide it in more places. And now the phone shoots 4K. Like it's, you know, you can take an iPhone and a MacBook Air and then Final Cut Pro, and you could make a beautiful, beautiful film. Like the tools are so handy, and they're all just, you know, it's all accessible. You know, I mean, when I started out, it was the beginning of the digital video mini DV tapes. You know, I did a little bit of film, but you know, it was too expensive. So we always did everything in video. And just the quality that you guys have at your fingertips right now, like I wish I could have started my career now with all these tools. It's insane. Just you can make anything that you want to make today. Just you have it in your pocket and you have it at home. Just you don't need all this fancy stuff anymore. I remember when editing systems were like racks this big, and it was, you know,
Called an editing machine.
editing machine, and it was in a refrigerator because it would overheat. You know, you could shoot and edit a movie and distribute it off of your phone and never even touch a computer. Like that's amazing, absolutely amazing. It's the reason I've always loved using Apple products has always just been it's tools to be creative, and they give you the tools, and you know it's just a matter of what do I want to do with it, and those possibilities are limitless.
What about you, Clayton? I know you edited really most of this last movie on a MacBook Pro. And you told the story of being in the sound mix at Skywalker and being able to edit there in the background, make changes on the MacBook Pro. I mean, how does that?
I mean, I had the whole film in my backpack with a Thunderbolt drive, and I knew changes would come, and they did. And we made picture changes on the fly, and I was given AAFs to the sound guys on the fly, and giving them new picture reference on the fly. I mean, it's just all possible. And I was on set for the film, cutting on the laptop, and putting little reference movies on my iPhone, and taking them to the director to say, "Here's what you got so far," and because he didn't have time to come to the edit suite, and so yeah, it's all, we've built a whole facility, way back, we started Splice with 2 Avid Symphonies and couldn't afford to grow with that, and we went Final Cut 7, and we've built an X-stand and a whole facility based on sort of affordable technology, just doing it in a creative way to be able to actually charge for it.
What about the iOS stuff? Do you do, are you using phones for capturing stuff or, iPad applications? How does that work?
For us, we're all post, so I'm not gonna pretend to be a production guy.
Do you see people coming in with stuff like that?
Oh yeah, that's, again, our assistants, the editors, again, the stuff they know, they're dealing with every flavor, every frame size and time code, and it's just, you're mixing and matching all the time, so.
Yeah. That must be pretty much the case also. I think Russian Woodpecker, a lot of that was edited on a MacBook Pro, is that right?
Yeah, MacBook Pro, iMac, sometimes both at the same time. And yeah, I've been Mac based since I started editing, which was in high school, so like second version of Final Cut, and yeah, it's what Mike said. It just gets the computer out of the way, in a sense. It's always been just about ease and comfort and seamlessness. I've dabbled with using an iPad as a control surface. I kind of always just search for the most fluid means of cutting, and I think part of that comes from having experience cutting 16, which is so tactile, and I always search for that kind of feeling when I'm working, is that I want to kind of be as immersed in the technology as possible, so that the technology disappears. And that's one thing I really do dig about X, is that it feels like it just wants you to play with it with your hands, like that.
Like that.
And drop your water. So I think we have maybe another 15 minutes, so we don't go too long. I'm wondering if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask the panelists.
When editing, I guess you wouldn't do this for a narrative, like documentary, or a narrative film, but like for a documentary, other than the Ken Burns thing.
Yep.
In Final Cut, what's the best way to put a picture, like a still image?
So what would you do?
Are you talking about just applying motion to it, or?
Just to, for storytelling, what's the best way you feel like to include a picture into a documentary?
You mean in terms of making it visually interesting, not just a static
just-
picture? Yeah.
When editing, I feel like you have to have them engage. What's the most engaging way to do it?
There's no end to the number of ways you can do that, and it has to come out of the type of story you're telling, where that picture is placed and what it's doing. You can create a parallax effect if you want to give it depth and make it 3D. You can. I think it's sometimes very effective just to have a still that does not move and just hangs there. It's entirely about visual rhythm. It's entirely about how it connects with what's coming before and what's coming after. It's entirely about composition. There's no wrong way or right way, but if you play with 30 ways to include a still, and depending on the resolution of the still, if you can show different sections of it to draw attention, so that the reason you're using it is entirely justified. You don't want anything ever to just be like, I'm putting this here because I need to cover a cut. That it all has to serve story, and it all has to be visually woven together.
Check out The Kid Stays in the Picture. It's a documentary about Robert Evans' career. They cut it, I mean, it's almost all historic imagery, yeah, and they went to town on it, but it's a cool style. But yeah, a number of different ways you can do that.
There was, yes, up in the middle.
For low-budget filmmakers, what Final Cut add-ons or outside software would you say are supported?
Yeah. What sort of plugins, add-ons did you use?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer of keeping it as native as possible. I don't use a lot of plugins or effects, and a lot of that is just because technology is always changing. So sometimes, plugins won't update as quickly as software does, and there's a lot of issues that you could run into with that. I'm trying to think of what we use. A lot of the stuff is just Ripple trainings we use there.
Their title templates?
No, they have adjustment layers that you can use. It's really, really cool. You can do a lot of cool stuff with that. And Pixel Film Studios has a lot of really cool transitions and stuff, and I think every one of them is like $20. It's great. Like that was a big selling point for me, was that you can make your own stuff even in motion and publish it as an effect or as a template, and then it's yours. So you can get the exact look that you want if you can spend the time learning a little bit about motion as well. But Pixel Film is just really, like I said, everything's like $25. It's awesome.
And I think, Clayton, you used some plugins on the...
Yeah, plugins or there's third-party stuff. I dabbled a little bit with, I think it's Color Finale. It's a pretty cool color corrector. Alex 4D, for a feature film, you have to have all your burn-ins and stuff to translate to the audio guys. So that gave me, the time code and foot and frame and all the different burn-in, like property of and all that kind of stuff. Sync and Link was key. All of our production audio, the broadcast wave files come in with all the metadata, and it's 8 channels of audio, and they're labeled for you. Well, you have to run it through another application to get that metadata into Final Cut, and in theory through to the audio guys for mix, so you can tell where the booms and lavs and different microphones are. So, Producer's Best Friend.
Producer's Best Friend's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great one. But that's a lot more of that stuff's like, I think.
Yeah, it's more workflow stuff.
Workflow
but it's all part of the process. It's part, that ties it all as a facility, at least with multiple artists working on a project. So.
Yeah.
I don't really use a lot of plugins at all. I use After Effects, and I make all of my...
You're using motion.
Sorry,
really.
I'm a heathen. Most of the plugins, they're not even really plugins. They're just ways of moving XML and metadata around so that you can get the sound to the mixer and the EDL working for the DI guy. I did want to follow up on the still thing. So, but maybe just talk to me after, because I think you might be asking a technical question about X.
Yeah. Cool.
Just out of curiosity, how many people here want to be directors? Raise your hand. How many people want to be editors? Camera people? Writers?
Should say how many people want to be all 4.
Yeah, how many people want to be everything?
Yeah.
That's the right answer.
That's a trick question. So yes, there's a question up here.
I personally use Final Cut. A lot of people say that Avid is industry standard and you have to learn Avid. Do you guys believe that's necessary?
No.
Sorta.
If you're up for a job and they want you to cut an Avid, then guess what? You gotta learn Avid.
Yeah. Yeah, and for the same matter, you need to know Premiere and Final Cut 7, because you might come on to something that has been in production for 2 years on a platform, and they're not going to want to switch over. So I mean, and when it comes down to it, it's a tool for doing the same job, and you will be fluid, because you'll know how to cut. So if you know how to cut on one system, you can learn very quickly how to translate that to another system.
Is Final Cut just your personal favorite?
right now, it depends on the project, honestly. It really does depend on the project. If I'm, close your ears. If I'm doing something that I know is going to be very After Effects heavy, I might do it in Premiere because Premiere can link up to After Effects really simply. If I'm going to be doing something that has a huge amount of footage, definitely X. And I tend to work on projects that have a huge amount of footage.
What about you guys? What do you think? Clayton and Mike?
Well, I mean, I at this point in my career, I'm sort of an island, so I can pick whatever I want. And right now, Final Cut 10 is my favorite. I don't see any reason that I would do the next feature any differently. But changing hats as a facility owner, I've always tried to have continuity across our artists, and we went from Avid to Final Cut 7. We've gone from Apple Color to Luster to Resolve. I mean, you just make those things systematically. And I have officially quit trying to make our facility at Splice like one edit system. You just can't. We, our editors, except for me, know everything. We have seats of Avid, we have seats of, every system has Premiere on it, every system has Final Cut 10 on it. It's sort of up to the editor, and quite frankly, we're onlining things that are coming from different production companies. We have to know, and we're right now in the debate of, well, do you online native and the tool is offline in, or do you just do everything in Resolve?
I have no idea what you use.
Yeah, and I think the other point to this, this phrase industry standard is an interesting phrase because, there's the point about what people are comfortable using and what people, projects are going to be made with certain products and so forth. The other part of that I think, certainly from an Apple perspective, would push back, and I'm not sure these guys would push back on, is the idea that Final Cut Pro 10 is not up to the job. So, some people say, well, and industry standard sometimes implies, well, you can't do this kind of work that all these guys do in Final Cut Pro 10. That's manifestly not true. So, if you enjoy using the tool and you feel like it makes it easy for you to tell the stories, then you shouldn't be put off by people somehow saying it's not industry standard. It's not really a meaningful term in that sense.
Well, if there's any industry standard, Pro Tools for audio is industry standard. And as a facility, for years, we were running Nuendo, and I would walk into Skywalker with 400 tracks and Nuendo tracks.
Right.
And it translates just fine. It just there's so many ways in and out of boxes now, it's just not.
I think, people get overly caught up on that, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know when we switched to 10, when I started, the whole reason, while we were doing the switch, I was Googling like crazy to just be like, who else is using this? There's got to be other people. Because I'm looking at this program, I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. Like, this is the best kept secret in the industry right now. Like, this does everything. And I couldn't find enough people that were doing it. And I just started doing it. And, even when I said to other editors that worked at NBC, oh yeah, we're doing something, why? And it's like, because it's better.
Yeah.
Like, don't ever.
I don't
get
preach
put
anything,
down.
but it really is a good way to work, so.
Yeah, don't ever get put down by other people.
More questions? I'll take one up here. Yep.
When working alongside a director editing a project, who's the best kind of director that's makes the work flow easier, contributes to the work the best?
I think a lot of that's language. It's all going to be how you interact with each other. It's always funny whenever we have new producers come in that do shows, because there's a rhythm that you just don't have with them, and a lot of that just takes time. That's why I usually hear like a lot of editors and directors kind of travel together.
Oh yeah.
You
No,
know?
it's trust. You have to, the best director, they have to trust you. It's very collaborative, and the failures that I've seen, even on the film we've done, is when there's a lack of trust. You have to, it's one thing to do that if you want to write, direct, do all those things, but ultimately you want to hone a craft, and you have to trust the other people on your crew to do their part. So the best director is somebody who trusts you to do your job and gives you space. Most of cutting the film, he left me alone, and he would come in strategically and work with me and then make it better. But if he when he sits over my shoulder, it's a nightmare, because don't tell me how to push the buttons. Just tell me what you want, and I'll get there for you. So it goes both ways.
2 more frames to left.
Right,
2 more
right.
frames.
Yeah, it's about the collaboration, and that's the best part of the job, really. I mean, in the end, you're going to work on hundreds of projects in your lifetime, and it's about the people that you're working with. It's about the fun that you have making the thing. And for me, it works best with great communication, space to allow me to be creative,
Make mistakes.
make mistakes because I discover things by screwing up and by accident, and not treating me like I'm the computer that you are like using voice control. Like that's dehumanizing and the project sucks. And also an open mind. I think that it's really important that the director does not get attached to the way something's been for 2 weeks or a month, because there might be an idea that just like completely cracks the whole thing open, and if you can't see that it works and that it changes things, then I think that's trouble.
More questions? I think we can probably take a couple more. Another question?
When using, like, let's say you use Dragon Frame with stop motion, and then you get a clip, and then you put it into Final Cut, how does things like that, 24 frames per second film, with something like that, where it's like a different,
I actually don't know what Dragonfly is.
it's a stop motion animation program that, like, you take pictures and it uploads it all in a row, and then you compress it into like a MP4 file.
Mhm.
And it's your clips. That, like, how does that differ? Or I was wondering if you've ever had like experience yourself with something like that.
With conforming frame rates.
Not necessarily conforming.
I think that's the beauty with where we're at with technology. It doesn't matter. It's just another set of media. It doesn't matter if it came from a Red camera or an Arri camera or your iPhone. It's just, it's just more media.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter, the frame rate's different.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I mean it'll matter depending on how you're onlining it, and whether there's sync audio with that was shot in PAL at 25 and you're working in a 24 space, then you have to deal with that, and I think in that regard it's important to kind of you no matter what technology you're using, you do have to understand like the basic principles behind it, and Final Cut X does a great job at just making it work, but you do have to understand what's actually going on under the hood.
Yes.
So kind of along the line of that, recently I was working with footage from 2 different sources, and one was 30p and one was 24, and I was just wondering what's the best way to deal with that particular, like having a 30 frame and then 24 frame at the same time.
It depends on, like I said, it depends on the output, and depends on the sound sync. So if there's no sound sync, that's an issue. You can just toss it into Final Cut X and it'll deal with it. But you may want to pre-convert it with a program like Twixtor, to just get everything the same and on board before you come in.
And to Devin's point, it'll make a difference if you're just staying, say, in Final Cut Pro 10, you're just going to output the project from
Right.
there, versus you're going to go to some onlining process further down the track. In the former case, it's more straightforward because the software can do a lot of that automatically for you to conform the frame rates and give you whatever output you need. But if you're going to send that off to somewhere else, or you've got someone else doing a sound mix or that kind of thing, then there's some extra things you need to take into consideration.
Yeah, if you have any say over the matter, shoot in the same frame rate across the board.
So I think that takes us up to about 3:30. We're going to obviously hang around a little bit up here if you guys want to come up and talk about anything in more detail. And as you may have noticed, we have a table out the front with an iMac with Final Cut Pro 10 on it as well. So if you've got any more specific questions about Final Cut Pro 10 or the Apple stuff, feel free to come out there and see us, and we can have a look at the software, and hopefully we can answer the more detailed questions you might have. Thanks all very much for sitting us.
I'm sorry, can I plug something really quick?
Sure. As long as it's not After Effects.
The Russian Woodpecker is having a theatrical run starting October 13th at IFC, 16th at some AMC theater. I don't believe it's this one. And then it's on that same date. It will be available on iTunes and Vimeo. So check it out, please.
Thank you all very much.